We're approaching the home stretch of the first season, and the show has really found its groove. Today we've got two bangers that really feel like the Twilight Zone, if you know what I mean. Let's get to it, shall we?
Those are the doors, that is a chair with a panda on it.
Washington, D.C., and you with it.
It is an area which we call the Twilight Zone.
School teacher Helen Foley comes home to find the world's creepiest little girl sitting patiently on the steps. Rather than running quickly into her apartment to get away from the demon child, she sits next to her, talks at her for a bit, and then invites her in for some hot chocolate. The girl then confesses that she knows all about Helen, including the fact that the older woman doesn't like marshmallows in her hot chocolate. So they're both psychopaths. The girl has a seat and talks politely, making conversation like a heavily medicated old lady. She then calls out the fact that Helen burned her arm once, and Helen discusses having trouble with her childhood memories. The little girl starts to interrogate her host about a man she saw at the bank earlier in the day. Helen eventually admits that she did see someone familiar who made her uneasy, but she couldn't remember who he was.
I know all about you. Don't you remember?
Yes. I remember that you said that.
I don't know if it's the haunting Goldsmith glockenspiel or the fact that the little girl sounds like Zelda Rubinstein, but I'm getting serious poltergeist vibes here. After finally saying her name, or at least her nickname, Marky, the little girl senses someone coming and runs out the back door. Helen then opens the front door and meets a man named Peter Selden, the same familiar man she saw earlier in the day. She invites him in as he explains that he used to work for Helen's mother. He asks her how she's doing after, quote, what happened, unquote, and presses her to see if she remembers anything from those days, which she doesn't. Then, as if he weren't already raising a bunch of red flags, he says this.
Well, it's wonderful to see you grown up the way you have. Just as beautiful as you were when you were a little girl. I had quite a crush on you. I lived in the same apartment building.
To be clear, he was an adult male and she was a 10-year-old girl. Now, I know somebody in the comments is probably going to tell me that I don't get it because I'm too young, that like back in the 60s it was totally fine to say that you had a crush on a little girl, that there was nothing wrong with it, it was innocent. But I don't buy it. I think we need Chris Hansen up in here. He follows that bombshell with another, explaining that he was the first person to find Helen's mother's body, and that the man who killed her is still at large. Helen starts to have vague memories of the murder, which she witnessed, but nothing concrete. Helen changes the subject as Selden goes to leave, talking about the strange little girl named Marky. Selden, not done with his shelling campaign, then says that Marky was Helen's nickname as a child. More memories start flooding in as Selden looms ominously in her personal space, and Helen starts to hear Marky singing Twinkle Twinkle, which Selden does not hear. There's something strangely chilling about little girls singing nursery rhymes. Ignoring the blatant signs of mental illness, Selden then shows Helen a picture of her when she was younger, when she looked just like Marky. Some indeterminate time later, Helen lies in the dark and remembers just about everything. She goes to tell Marky to stop singing in the hallway, and Marky basically confirms that she and Helen are one and the same. She even asks if Helen remembers how she got her burn yet, which she doesn't.
And you were doing so well, Helen. You were starting to remember things.
Man, who knew your inner child could be so freaking creepy? Back in the apartment, Helen goes into full-on denial mode, so Marky starts berating her. And as Helen turns to face the truth, Selden jump scares her. He then does a Bond villain monologue, confessing everything.
That night it was me in your bedroom. I killed your mother.
and that leads to a physical confrontation. Helen tries to run, but in the ensuing struggle, she pushes Selden down the stairs, killing him. Later, a police detective confirms that Helen is innocent of any wrongdoing, while her doctor explains how Marky came out of her imagination. The detective then gives his review of The Twilight Zone.
Weird. Really weird.
This is the first time I would call the series genuinely disturbing, and I'm glad it has a happy ending. Sure, the twists are obvious and the climax is hokey, but as a study in tone and psychology, it's a damn good episode. It does leave me with one nagging question though. What was the deal with that burn? It's never explained.
Miniature marshmallows.
They're jet puffed, so they stay soft and blend easily into your favorite drinks, desserts, and salads. Remember, they're jet puffed to stay soft.
What? Miniature marshmallows.
Our second episode introduces us to the ulcer-plagued ad executive Gart Williams, who Rod Serling alleges is 38 years old. I refuse to believe that that man is almost a decade younger than me. In fact, I know his secret, that he's actually over 6,000 years old. Gart is in a meeting with his fellow executives and his domineering boss, Mr. Miserable, which sounds a lot like Mr. Miserable. After admitting to losing the agency an enormous contract, Mr. Miserable lectures and shouts at Gart to, quote, push, 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 unquote.
It's push, 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 all the way, all the time, right on down the line.
Gart tells him to shut his fat mouth and runs back to his office, where he foreshadows his own dark fate in a way that probably won't get me in trouble with the algorithm.
Want anything at all?
Yeah. A sharp razor and a chart of the human anatomy showing where all the arteries are.
On the train ride home, Gart is lulled to sleep by the sounds of Mr. Miserable yelling push, push, push.
It's push, push, push all the way, all the time.
When he opens his eyes, he finds that the train has transformed and stopped at a town called Willoughby in the summer of 1888. Gart argues with the irrepressibly cheerful conductor, but as the train lurches forward again, he wakes back up in the present day, on the frigid train ride home. He describes his dream to the conductor, who has never heard of Willoughby. After a hard day at the office, Gart gets home to an aggressively Karen wife. Gart explains he still has a job despite calling his boss fat, but that he's feeling sick and tired of the high-stress life he's found himself in. His wife displays a negative store of sympathy by yelling at him for being weak and pathetic. Gart pleads with her to understand that he wants a simpler life, but she doesn't care. All she wants, she explains as she literally takes the high road, is to continue to live the swanky life his job provides for her. What a lovely marriage. The next day, back on the train, the conductor tells Gart he looked into Willoughby, but could find no record of such a place anywhere nearby. Gart falls asleep again and wakes up to the train stopping at Willoughby. He gathers his things and contemplates getting off, but doesn't quite make up his mind before he finds himself back in the present again, back to his depressing, stressful life. He tells himself that next time, he really will get off. I could make an easy adolescent joke here, but I'm much too sophisticated for that sort of thing. Back in his office, he has to listen to his boss yelling push, push, push some more, while he struggles with his ulcers. He then takes a phone call, puts it on hold to take another phone call, calls in his secretary to get some information, and while on both phones, his secretary, ignoring his predicament, tells him that Mr. Miserable wants to see him. Gart runs into the bathroom, hallucinates his boss, and then breaks his mirror. Desperate, he goes back to the phone to call his wife. Yeah, I'm sure she'll stop your panic attack, buddy. He walks away from his job and gets back on the train home, immediately willing himself to sleep. Naturally, he wakes up in Willoughby again, and leaving his incredibly flat briefcase behind, he gets off the train and is greeted warmly by the locals, who all seem to know and love him. He presumably lives happily ever after. Smash cut to the present, where we find out Gart is lying dead in the snow, having leapt from the train. The poor conductor solemnly bears witness as his body is carted away by the funeral home, called Willoughby and Son. Rod Serling considered this his favorite episode of the first season, and I can see why. Sure, it's dark and it's depressing, but I think it's supposed to serve as a warning about what happens when you forget what's really important in life and choose at a young age to go down a path you might regret. It strikes a chord with me, as someone who chose long ago to resist the pull of a big career in favor of a simpler, more relaxed way of living, to move to small-town suburbia rather than try to make it in the concrete jungle. And that's all I have on Nightmare as a Child and a stop at Willoughby. Now, as always, do all those YouTubey things, check out my Patreon, and all that other good stuff. But until next time, this is the Unapologetic Geek, telling you to never be ashamed of what you love. As long as you're not hurting anybody.
That's Willoughby right outside. Peaceful, restful, where a man can slow down to a walk and live his life full measure.